Hello folks. A few years ago I created a primer for Wasteland, the original classic. It was an extemporaneous video and thus had a fair amount of rambling and wasn't very well organized. I decided I should set out a more concise, scripted primer to lay out the basics of what you need to know to get into this great game and be able to enjoy it. Due to its age, Wasteland can be a little daunting for people who didn't grow up with gaming in the 80s. It's not insurmountable, but frustration and bashing your head against the wall doesn't make for an enjoyable experience. So let's see if we can't make things a little bit easier for you. Let's start with quickly going over the UI of the game. Because of legacy decisions, the UI is actually a little different from most games. For instance, the escape key doesn't open a menu, it advances the in-game clock. In order to pull up the main menu, you need to press F1. This contains all the normal stuff you'd expect, like saving and loading, but it also contains an option called Help. The Help option is, essentially, the original game manual imported into the game. Under Game Concepts is an entry for macros, which explains how to record macros in the game. This function was present in the original DOS version, and it's been added here, if a bit more clunky. Going back to the main screen, you'll see all the main commands you'll use across the bottom of the screen. Now, in the original classic versions, these were just the first letter. In this version, a couple have been changed to allow you to use the standard WASD for movement instead of just arrow keys like in the old DOS version. There's also a couple extra and new functions down there, the aforementioned F1, the camp button, and the journal button. The journal button is a new addition to the game. Pressing F2 will open it, giving you several important tabs. The Missions tab will show current and completed quests, something you'll definitely want as a new player. The quests will help point you towards what you should be doing and give you faint hints for a couple of the quests that are a bit opaque. The Passwords tab, of course, gives passwords. In the original game, you'd occasionally find passwords and combinations in the external paragraphs book as a method of copy protection. There's at least one hard lock in the game if you don't have them. While the passwords can also be found in the Paragraphs tab, this will save some time. Speaking of paragraphs, this tab contains all the paragraphs from the original game, both the legitimate ones and the made-up ones. Like the preamble says, it's best to wait until you finish the game to read through the paragraphs. There's some good stuff in there, including an entire fictional storyline. All the paragraphs are voice-acted. The ones with still motion video, like the intro, can only be watched when you find them in-game. Encounters and stats are just what it says on the tin. The camp button advances the in-game clock, handy for healing or waiting until night so radioactive tiles glow. The game has an in-universe 24-hour clock. Night is at 1800 and dawn is at 0600. It's also worth keeping in mind that there are multiple clock speeds depending on what kind of map you're on. Some maps, like the Overworld map, will advance 4 minutes for every movement or press of the escape key. At the other end, deep inside a building, it will have time pass at 4 tiles or presses of the escape key per single minute. The camp key is essentially a special macro that rapidly presses the escape key about 100 times. So on the Overworld map, around 6.5 hours go by, while inside a base, only about 25 minutes does. Going back to the game manual, let's take a look at attributes and skills. Unless you're an enthusiast for the old Mercenaries, Spies, and Private Eyes RPG, this will be a little different. You'll have 7 attributes you'll roll for character creation. Yes, roll. As in 3d6. There's strength, intelligence, luck, speed, agility, dexterity, and charisma. All of them are fully explained in the manual, but briefly, strength is unarmed combat and kicking indoors. Yes, you can do that. Intelligence we'll touch on in a minute. Luck is the standard catch-all, but primarily deals with damage mitigation and dodging. Speed is melee attack order. Guns still go first. Agility is melee combat, like swords and clubs, as well as dodging and climbing. Dexterity, on the other hand, is fine motor control, like lockpicking or using a gun. Charisma is just what you'd expect. Some are more important than others. Intelligence, for instance, is the most important attribute in the game because every single skill is gated by intelligence. You want to learn how to use an assault rifle? You need an IQ of 9. even though the attribute you actually use while shooting the thing is dexterity. If you're going for a melee build, you'll want strength for damage and agility to determine if you hit. If you're going for a gun build, you'll want dexterity. Everyone, no matter what build, will want intelligence, and you'll want an IQ of at least 15. While attributes range from 3 to 18, starting, there's no upper cap. Skills generally range from 0 to 7. At 0, you are unskilled and can't actually use the skill, while 7 represents a best-in-the-world master. Skills can be bought during character creation and at libraries. You spend skill points to buy them. Your skill points are 1-to-1 determined by your IQ score. So a starting character with 10 intelligence score will have 10 skill points to spend. Skills can cost 1, 2, or 3 points to unlock, with the cost doubling every level. So if you want to learn the medic skill, you first need an IQ of 15 just to unlock it. Then you need to spend 2 skill points to get it at level 1, 4 more for level 2, 8 more for level 3, and so on. So, how the hell do you reach 7 in a skill? That's 254 total skill points for a level 7 medic. The answer is learn by doing. Whenever you use a skill in-game, a few things happen. First, you get a tiny amount of XP for your character, which is the base for a couple of XP exploits. But you also have a tiny chance to increase your skill, with you having a better chance to increase it the more difficult to check. This works for both out-of-combat skills, like medic or climb, as well as combat skills, like brawling or assault rifle. It's worth keeping in mind that you can only raise skills like this up to the level of your character, so a level 1 character won't raise anything by doing. Also, for combat skills, you can only raise them to the level of your enemy. That said, this very quickly ceases to be a concern, and it only matters at the very beginning of the game. Moving on, let's briefly discuss character generation. Like most RPGs, this can be extremely involved, and everyone has preferences, but I'll briefly go over the basics and my preferences. Characters can only be made at the Ranger Citadel. Luckily, that's where you start the game. You can only have 4 PCs, so if you want to make your own, you'll have to delete one of the pre-generated characters. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, just press R and then pick the one you want to wipe. Note, this will eliminate their gear and money, so feel free to pass that off first if you like. Then press C to get started. Attributes are first. You may roll as many times as you like, and you may need to roll several times to get what you want. Unlike the SSI Gold Box games, there's no modify command, so you're stuck with what you pick. Once you're satisfied, press 2 to accept. Name, sex, and nationality have minimal impact on the game. The biggest impact is that your sex and nationality combination affect what your portrait looks like. After that is skill selection. They're listed in order based on the IQ to unlock requirement. It will show you the required IQ, the cost to unlock and /improve, and the current level of the skill. The screen can only show 9 skills at a time, so use the up and down arrow to cycle through the pages. As you can see, when you purchase a skill, the cost doubles. Generally, you only need to put a single skill point in any skill, since you'll improve as you go, and there's a lot of skills you'll probably want. All characters start with 1 pistol, a knife, a crowbar, and some other stuff of mixed usefulness. If you want to go the firearms route, put 1 or 2 points in clip pistol. If you want to go the knife route, you'll want knife fight. It's its own skill. And brawling. If you want to punch people, take pugilism and brawling. If you just want to do melee in general, say using that crowbar or a proton axe, you'll want brawling. The reason so many want brawling is because the higher the brawling skill, the more melee attacks you get. It wouldn't be a bad idea to give pistoleros the brawling skill too, because beating an enemy with an empty pistol also uses brawling. After you pick your skills, you have a choice to save your character, and there you go. If you goof and want to go back a screen, just press escape. Aside from your primary combat skill, the other skills you'll likely want every character to have are climb, swim, and medic. Other skills that are good to have are perception, acrobat, and silent movement. You'll want at least 1 character somewhere to have picklock, demolitions, bomb disarm, and safe crack. At some point, you'll likely find good use for forgery, cryptology, and metallurgy. Pretty much every skill has a use somewhere in the game, but some of those uses can be covered by other skills. You may also want to put a point into other weapon skills so that when you gain access to them, you'll already have the skill. The general progression of firearms is clip pistol, then SMG, then rifle, then assault rifle. Since you can only buy new skills at libraries, it's generally not worth it to hang on to any skill points unless there's just nothing that remotely interests you. Once you make your party, you're all set to explore. You'll see your party represented by the little tabletop icon figure guy. Their appearance will be based on whatever the character is in the number 1 slot. Movement can be accomplished by using the mouse and clicking where you want to go, but I really don't recommend it. Just using the arrow keys or WASD works much, much better. If you wish to enter a location, just walk into it. Text box in the lower right will give you information about wherever you're walking. Remember, you're in a desert, so if you see "it's very hot," know that you're in the hottest part of the desert, and anyone without a canteen will take damage. On the plus side, you can't get into any random combats when on one of those tiles. Handy for resting. You may notice I've mentioned that a couple times now. That's because Wasteland has no magic potions, no magic bandages, and no magic food. If your character is injured, there's only 2 ways to heal them: pass time or pay an NPC doctor. NPC doctors can be expensive, and generally by the time you walk there, you'll either be healed or dead. This is because the game has a very robust health system. On the lower left of the screen where your party is listed, you'll see a stat called Con. That's your current health. When you reach 0 Con, the numbers will be replaced with UNC, unconscious. As long as you aren't sick or irradiated, it'll be red if you are, you'll just heal with time. Starting around -10 Con, things will go poorly for you. You'll progress through increasingly worse states: serious, critical, mortal, comatose, and finally dead. Once seriously wounded, you will get worse with time, not better. This is where that medic skill comes in handy. You want everyone to have it so you don't find yourself in a position where the one person without the skill is the only one still around to do something. As for that part I mentioned about being sick or irradiated, yep, game has status effects. They all do pretty much the same thing, prevent healing over time, but they have different names. They can also only be healed by NPC doctors, so keep an eye out. We're almost done, folks. I'll very quickly go over combat. The options presented are pretty self-explanatory. The listed options can either be selected by picking the number, i.e. 1 for run, or by pressing the first letter, R for run. Keep in mind, however, that run isn't run away, it's move. You can either move as a party or an individual. If you want to split the party mid-combat, this is how you do it. If you want to run away from combat entirely, you'll have to move the whole party far enough away that your enemy can't attack. For melee, that's basically 1 tile. For ranged enemies, you pretty much need to move them off the screen. And since they can move too, that can be a tall order. Combat is phase-based. That means you assign actions to everyone in your party, and then it all happens mostly simultaneously. Guns go first, generally your shooters, then their shooters. Then melee happens based on speed. Furthermore, just because you've shot some robot death machine down doesn't mean it won't get to fire off a dying shot as well. Like I said, it's simultaneous combat. Plus side, that guy with a stick won't get to swing if you gun him down first. Should the entire party get knocked unconscious, time will pass until someone wakes up. The enemy will still be there though, and as soon as you move, combat will start again. So, stabilize anyone seriously wounded or worse. This is actually friendlier than other versions where combat instantly restarts. I mean, there's a good chance you're toast regardless, but you've got a better chance of surviving. Also remember that seriously wounded characters get worse as time passes. Every round of combat causes time to pass, and much more time will pass if everyone's knocked out and you have to wait for someone to wake up. This can very well kill you if you aren't lucky. On the plus side, it's a party-based game, so if a few people die, you can just remake them as privates. Speaking of ranks, let's talk about levels briefly. Levels in the game are given as military ranks. You start as a private at level 1, level 2 is a private first class, and so on up through the ranks to Supreme Jerk at level 183. Yes, level 183, requiring a whopping 17 million experience points. Anyway, after a few combats, hit the R key to radio in. If you qualify for a level, you'll be given 2 MaxCon, hit points, for free, and be given 2 adventure points to spend. You can spend these points on any of your attributes or for more MaxCon. In general, you'll want your first several levels to go into IQ, partially because you're likely to want more skills, and also because there's skills that require an IQ higher than 18. Skills unlock up to level 24, in fact. Some of those skills can be learned at libraries, while others require specific locations. That said, they all have their uses, so it's probably worth seeking them out. After that, feel free to shore up weaker attributes or go whole hog on whatever you're specialized in. Before wrapping up, let me touch on a couple things that I can't quite fit into the script anywhere else. Using things. The game allows you to use any item, any attribute, and any skill, anywhere, or against anything or any person. Generally, it doesn't do anything, but you can do it. Press the U key, select the player you want to do the thing, select if you want them to use a skill, item, or attribute, then select the skill, item, or attribute you want them to use, and then select where you want them to use it. For instance, if you wanted to pick a lock on a door, you'd press U, the character number, S or 1 for skill, whatever number pick lock is, and then the arrow key in the direction of the door. The game will tell you if you succeeded. Or you could select 3 for attribute and then 1 for strength to kick it down. Or select I or 2 for item and then the number for your law rocket and just blow up the door. You'll notice you can pick any of the directions or space. It can be confusing if the game wants you to use an item on a direction or on space. So, if you're showing the Visa card to the head crusher, do you use the arrow key or the space bar? Don't remember. If one doesn't work, do the other one. Generally, I use the arrow if I'm handing it over, and space if I'm just showing it off, but it can be confusing. When using medic, you'll pick the character to be healed instead of a direction. But remember, you can't do that to restore hit points. Just drag them up from seriously wounded or worse. A very important note, using skills outside of combat, or just standing around doing nothing, like if you want to get a sandwich, does not advance the in-game clock. In other words, if you're patient enough, a character with level 1 medic can bring someone back from comatose, provided the player is patient enough to use the skill over and over and over again. Probably hundreds of times. Yes, I've done it. Might want to read up that section in the manual about macros. There's plenty more to this game. So much more. Like using forgery on the webs of deceit, or flamethrowers sucking because they aren't linked to any actual skill. But I like to think I've covered the most important thing. For mechanics, the manual should cover anything I missed. If there's any questions about something I left off, or something wasn't clear enough, feel free to ask in the comments. Lord knows I don't mind talking about Wasteland. I hope you find this video useful, and I hope it isn't too long. So until next time, folks, have a good one.